ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד. And lighten our eyes with Torah, unite our hearts to love your name. Then we shall never, ever stumble. Then we shall never, ever stumble. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך.
Shabbat Shalom, welcome. We're so happy to see you. Oh, it looks like some of my virtual screen is showing through here. That's very weird. Hi, so much better. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Blake. I'm zooming at you straight from Westchester Reform Temple. I'm sitting here in our beautiful Sifriya, which you probably can guess from my surroundings is the temple library, and behind me is an Aron HaKodesh, a holy ark where we keep Torah scrolls. And how fitting, because tonight is not just Shabbat, we wish you a Chag Sameach. Tonight is Simchat Torah, the Jewish people's festival of Torah, where we celebrate completing yet another yearly cycle of Torah. It's amazing that no matter how much has changed in our lives, and how much has changed in our lives over the last year, Torah is a constant. And yet I'm reminded of an old saying from outside of the Jewish tradition, that a person can never enter the same river twice, because that person is no longer the same person, and the river is no longer the same river. And so it is with Torah. We grow and change, and so too, although the words on the parchment are the same year in and year out, from one generation to the next, indeed from one eon to the next, our experience of those words changes dramatically throughout our lives and throughout the story of the Jewish people. So as we mark sacred time tonight, both for Shabbat and this festival of Simchat Torah, I want to acknowledge that our stories have been merged with the story of the Jewish people entire. And tonight we'll explore some of the ways in which our stories all intersect with the master story of the Jewish people and the Jewish tradition. I'm joined tonight by my colleagues, Cantor Amanda Kleinman, who is zooming at you from the sanctuary, and she is joined by Pete Malinverney, our beloved pianist and conductor. Let's give a wave to a socially distanced Pete. Hi, Pete. It's great to see you. And we're also joined here at the temple by Rabbi Danny Reeser, who is zooming at you from his office. So we're in 3 different locations of the WRT campus, but we're very happy to join you, each in your own places. I hope that you are safely ensconced at home and are ready for a joyful Shabbat and festival evening. Chag Sameach. We're going to kindle the lights of this Shabbat and Yom Tov. We invite you to join us as we join in the prayer over the kindling of Sabbath and festival light. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat v'shel Yom Tov. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.
We welcome Shabbat together now with the words of Lecha Dodi. Before we sing the last verse, we would invite you to rise and to greet the Sabbath bride. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor וזכור בדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי. אורי אורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה. תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. 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 We remain standing for the Baruch Hu, our call to prayer. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. The next piece of liturgy in our service is the text Ma'ariv Aravim that thanks God for changing times and changing seasons. Tonight, in honor of Simchat Torah, rather than the words of Ma'ariv Aravim, we'll sing to you the first verses from the book of Genesis, which Rabbi Blake will chant a little bit later in our service. There was evening, there was morning, Hine Tov Me'od, and it was very good. There was evening, וירא אלוהים את כל אשר עשה, והנה טוב מאוד. וירא אלוהים את כל אשר עשה, והנה טוב מאוד. There was evening, there was morning, there was evening, there was morning. ויהי ערב, ויהי בוקר, טוב מאוד. ויהי ערב, ויהי בוקר, טוב מאוד. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד, שם כבוד, מלכותו לעולם, לעולם ועד. And you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you on this day shall be upon your heart, shall be upon your heart. And you shall teach them diligently unto your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and when you rise up, that you shall bind them for a sign upon your hands, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your house, and upon your gates, and upon your gates, that you may remember and do all of my commandments, and be holy unto your God, unto your God, unto your God. We continue with Mi Chamocha, our people's song of freedom. Mi Chamocha, Ba'ilim Adonai. Adonai imloch leolam va'ed. ונאמר כי פד אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, קהל ישראל. Please rise for the Amidah. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Yalalai, lai, lai, 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 yalalai, lai, lai. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מוריד הטל, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please take these next few moments for silent prayer. one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say Amen. 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 Descend on us, and the world will say Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say Amen. Oh, say Shalom Bimromav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel. Amen, Amen. Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. May the one who makes peace in the heavens descend on us, and the world will say Amen.
It's been said that one of the great insights that the Jewish people have is evident when you come into our sanctuary, into our place of worship. When you walk into a synagogue, in the front of the room, in any place of worship, you find the thing that's most important to that people. And when you come into a synagogue, what you see in the front of the room isn't a picture of a person. Rather, what you find in the front of the room is a scroll. And inside of that scroll is a story. The good thing about stories is that stories allow us to find ourselves in them. We can read the words and hear about other people's lives, but in hearing the words of a story, we may hear not just about someone who lived long ago in mythic times. We may find that we're actually hearing a story that's about ourselves. That's the wisdom of the Jewish tradition. That's the wisdom of the Jewish story, of the Torah, of Simchat Torah, of the holiday that we begin tonight. So as we prepare to both conclude an annual cycle of Torah reading and begin another one new, we ask that if you would, please rise as we remove our Torah scrolls from the ark. This evening, in a few moments, we're going to have the opportunity to hear some true stories told by WRT congregants. And although those stories are true from their own lives, the art of storytelling is one that requires not just experience in living, but also experience in storytelling. And WRT is really blessed to have a gifted storyteller among our congregation. Erica Radin has helped to advise our storytellers this year and helped to bring their life experiences to life in compelling ways by directing their stories and helping to make them compelling and meaningful. For that reason, we'd love to honor Erica now with the honor of offering the blessings before and after our Torah reading.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai hamavarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
And I'll be chanting the last verses of the book of Deuteronomy. Velo kam navi od beYisrael kemoshe asher yidao Adonai panim el panim. And there did not arise another prophet in Israel like Moses, who knew God face to face. לכל האותות והמופתים אשר שלחו אדוני לעשות בארץ מצרים לפרעה ולכל עבדיו ולכל ארצו. For all of the signs and wonders that God sent Moses to do in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and his servants and his entire land. ולכל היד החזקה ולכל המורא הגדול אשר עשה משה לעיני כל ישראל. And with a mighty hand and with great power did Moses do all of these things before all of Israel. And we chant now these words. Chazak, chazak, v'nitchazek. May we
Chazak, chazak, v'nitchazek.
be strong, and let us strengthen one another.
And now the first words of Torah. I've wound our scroll to the very beginning of Breshit, the book of Genesis. Amen. Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. At the very beginning of God's creating of the heavens and the earth, ve'haaretz, hayta tohu vavohu ve'choshech al pnei tehom, ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. When the earth was formless and waste, and God's presence was, and darkness was over the surface of the waters, and God's Spirit was hovering over the face of the waters. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vayehi or. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. Vayar Elohim et haor ki tov. God saw the light that it was good. Vayabdel Elohim bein haor ubein hachoshech. And God divided between the light and the darkness. Vayikra Elohim laor yom v'lachoshech kara laila. God called the light day, and the darkness God called night. Vayhi erev vayhi voker yom echad. There was evening and there was morning, day one.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Let me say one more word of thank you to Erica. Erica has put in countless hours with our storytellers to help make their stories as compelling as possible. She was also joined in selecting storytellers by me and also by Bonnie Bluestein and by Rochelle Waldman. So thank you to Erica and to this great team for helping to make this evening happen. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Yasher Koach, Erica, thank you. Let us now draw strength from the continuity of Torah, for that all of the disruption in our lives, we still have this that has rooted us and also given us wings to soar to higher spiritual heights in each and every age. Let us also draw strength from the fact that we are here alive and praying together, and yet we know so many loved ones who are in need of the strength that we might share. So many good people who have been sickened and taken from us by COVID-19. We pray for their recovery. So many people who lie on beds of sickness and pain and who are lonely and afraid. Hold them in your heart. If they are people whose names are known to you and who are dear, please feel invited to share their names now. And as a WRT community, we also pray for the following members: Mordechai Ben Yaakov, Deborah Kapnick, Nicole Schusse, Amelia Austin, Joyce Schertzer, Leah Greenspan, Aviva Tzila Bat Esther Bela, Dan Sokoloff, Jeffrey Millman, Leslie Dubner, Chava Bat Sara, Eliyahu Chaim Ben Fredel, Sheila Fried, Tanya Romanoff, Yitzchak Yona Ben May, Yaakov Hirsch Ben Rachel, Malka Tzipora Bas Rachel, Tamar Bat Malka, Heschel Meir Ben David Achana, David Zev Ben Fruma Etel, Rabbi Eitan Hammerman. If there are names that you'd like to share aloud or pronounce quietly, you can do so now. We pray for them with the words Misha Berach. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We invite you to rise at this time.
Chaim hi למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר. דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם.
There's a great line from one of the great storytellers of our time, Ira Glass, the host of the This American Life podcast. And it said that he was conducting a book signing or a reading of some kind, and someone in the audience stood up and said, Ira, I love This American Life. I've been listening since the beginning. I'm a lifelong fan. And every time I listen to the show, I always wonder how you get all these great little vignettes, how you get all these great little stories that so perfectly illustrate the point that you're trying to illustrate during the show. In short, how is it that so many great stories have happened to you in your life? And Ira evidently leans back and scratches his chin and thinks about it, and he goes, great stories happen to those who can tell them. Which is such a great way of saying that great stories are happening to us all the time. And the difference between someone who has a great story to share has all to do with your ability to tell it. And this evening, we're in for a real treat. We have 4 WERT congregants who have great stories that they're ready to tell, great stories that they're willing to share in the spirit of Simchat Torah, our holiday of celebrating the Jewish people's love of stories. This is the second year in a row that we've had a Simchat Torah story slam, an opportunity for congregants to tell a true story from their life. Last year, we heard stories on the theme of endings and beginnings in the spirit of this holiday, where we end one cycle of Torah reading and immediately begin the next one anew. This year, we have a theme as well. The theme of our 4 stories this year are stories of resilience. In a year that has been so trying for many of us personally, for us as a community, and essentially as a whole country and as a world, it's important that we hear stories of resilience. It may not help us to do a better job of combating the things that face us, but it'll help us to know that there are other people out there with us fighting the fight, and that together we can find resilience and make our way through this challenging time. So we have 4 storytellers this evening, and our first story comes from Dr. Fran Scheffler-Siegel. Fran is a PhD in speech and language and hearing sciences. She's been a member of Westchester Reform Temple since 2007. She is a regular participant in our Torah study group and is current president of the Women of Reform Judaism. Please welcome with me now and enjoy this story by Fran Scheffler.
So, it was February 2005. When I entered Alan's hospital room, he was alert and awake. And he surprised me with, "Hello, my silver fox." That was a greeting I hadn't heard in months. In fact, usually when I entered his room, I wasn't sure he knew I was there. Sometimes he would wake up for a little bit, for a little time, but mostly it was hard to know if he was aware of anything. On this particular day, it was different. "We need a new car," he told me, and then he instructed me to trade our 2 cars for a Mercedes sedan. I was to bring the salesman to him so that the car could be put in his name. And then, with those few instructions, he leaned back on his pillows, closed his eyes. Lucidity over. That was the most he had uttered in weeks. I pulled my chair up and I looked at him as he slept. I placed the brisket sandwich I had brought from home on his bed tray. It was still warm. I was still bringing him homemade food, hoping he might take a bite. I stared at his hospital bed and his gown and his PICC line and the drip bag, his belly fitfully rising and falling as he struggled to breathe. In that frail frame was the bigger-than-life guy I had married 18 years before. And now he'd been in a hospital for 8 months. 8 months is a long time. A new Mercedes? Really? Why? Why now? And why in his name? He knows he's not driving anymore. I'm not sure why we need a new car. And then I thought, well, a Mercedes sedan is large. A wheelchair would fit in the trunk. Maybe he wants to come home. I told him I'd arrange it anytime he wanted. He'd always refused. But maybe now he wanted to come home. So the next day, I wandered into a car dealer and I walked up to a young salesman, who took me for a test drive. Same day, we made a deal. And we made arrangements for him to come to the hospital for Alan to sign the papers. On the day of the appointment, I arrived early, and I made sure that Alan was awake and alert and oriented to what he was about to do. I hadn't seen him this alert in months, even more so than the first day when he started this. When the salesman entered, He strode over to Alan's bed and held out his hand, and Alan put his hand out, and the two men shook hands. The young, strong man shook hands with the old, sick man. At least that's what I thought. And then I thought, funny, or not so funny, Alan's not very old, just very sick. So Alan signed the papers, and then I heard the salesman say, "It's a good car, Mr. Scheffler. Mrs. Scheffler will be okay in it." Alan thanked him. The salesman left, and Alan fell into a deep sleep. So now he owned a brand new Mercedes sedan with a license plate that was transferred from his old car to this one. The plate, SMA. SMA means State Magistrates Association. It's plates for a judge. It was an honor he had earned in past years when he was an active and healthy public servant. Plates that connected our past to my future. 2 weeks later, Alan died. By then, I had been his caregiver for almost 10 years. On that day, he left me embraced by his SMA plated Mercedes. I thought of it as protection from heaven. I had that wonderful car for 12 years. Looking back, I now wonder who was the caregiver.
Thank you, Fran Scheffler-Siegel, for sharing that moving story. Our second storyteller this evening is Dr. John Bukvar. Dr. Bukvar is Vice Chair of the Department of Neurosurgery at Lenox Hill Hospital. He's been a member of Westchester Reform Temple for 15 years and was recently featured on the hit docu-series Lenox Hill on Netflix for his work in treating brain tumors. Please welcome now Dr. John Bukvar.
Good evening, and thank you again for allowing me to participate in this year's Torah Slam. My name is Dr. John Bukvar. My story of resilience will be centered around our experience in treating COVID patients at Lenox Hill Hospital and what it meant to me both personally and professionally. So to the organizers of this terrific event, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity. As you may remember, the pandemic really started, hence its name COVID-19, in really the last few days of 2019. The first case of coronavirus was really documented to be December 31st in Wuhan, China. And that's really rather overlooked when we talk about the current pandemic because it's really been such an event of 2020. If people were to ask, when was the biggest surge of cases, it was the last 2 weeks in March. And that was the scariest time for me personally and professionally. We were now being redeployed. So we were sort of militia. We were being taken out of our fields of neurosurgery, and I was being asked to, I took over all the clinical trials for COVID in our hospital, but my nurses were being taken, my PAs, my residents, all being redeployed to ICU coverage. And the cases kept coming. And we were being left to scramble for PPE, for ventilators, for just about everything. And actually our community through social media was able to generate a lot of N95 masks that people had in storage. And I ran around with my children getting N95s, delivering them to the hospitals. And that was really rather rewarding, but it became a scary, scary time. I remember the head of the Jacoby Hospital emergency room nurse died of coronavirus in the end of March. And then a young nurse at Mount Sinai His name is Caius Kelly. He's 48 years old, nurse manager at Mount Sinai, died on March 26th. And that's when the surge in our hospital system was almost overwhelming. At one point, the hospital here ran out of oxygen. We had so many patients on ventilators, we had to run around and bag patients. The state decided to close all schools on April 27th. So we still had kids going to school on April 27th. We still had the subway working normally. So it was not until the end of March that all schools were mandated to be closed. And so one thing we didn't do early enough in New York State was to shut it down. And our hospital systems felt the pinch for that. The USS Comfort came to New York Harbor at the end of March 30th, and the Javits Center helped. But frankly, at that point, it was too late. We had been overrun by patients, and it was a very, very challenging time. I remember I couldn't sleep much those 2 weeks in March. We were working late, and when we came home, we're watching the news, and then in the next day. I had worked with a Long Island boat repair guy to make hoods for our staff. We had a local guy in Westchester make us plexiglass anesthesia intubation boxes. So everybody from the community was working together, but it was a challenging time. But there were some beautiful and happy moments. We started the neighborhood around here, and White Plains Hospital started the 7 p.m. claps. And that for us, for healthcare workers, was just inspiring. Every day after a long day, to walk outside and just wave and get clapped at was just absolutely terrific. We saw some terrible deaths of young patients. We saw death here of a worker, a 42-year-old in Lenox. The chair of Columbia's emergency room committed suicide in late April. And I saw a young policeman from local department actually have a heart attack when he was told he was positive for COVID, and he died from his heart attack. He didn't die from COVID. So it was a very, very challenging time, but we persevered, we got through it, and we're back in business full time. I'm proud to say that the hospitals have become better places, even in New York and Westchester. We're safer, we're cleaner. It's funny, I think at the end of May was when George Floyd was killed, and that obviously erupted into significant civil unrest because of social injustices. And seeing the mass protests and to align with the protests, and we started kneeling at 7 p.m. and our slogan was, "You clap for us, we kneel for you," and that spread across the country rather quickly as healthcare workers aligned with peaceful protesters. So in the end, New York City reopened June 8th. We're back fully doing surgery. Obviously, we've had a little uptick recently, but it's very contained, and I expect that as long as we all keep wearing masks and doing the right thing and socially distance, and probably avoid indoor dining for a little bit longer and take care of our vulnerable populations, we're going to get out of this stronger and better together. So thank you again, and happy and a healthy new year to everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Bookvar, for both sharing your story and also for your service to our community, to our city, and to the whole New York metro region. Our gratitude goes out to you this evening especially. Our third storyteller this evening is Abby Underweiser. Abby is a 9th grade student at Scarsdale High School. Her dad grew up here in the congregation at WRT, and they have been members since the late 1960s. Abby likes to do musical theater, and she's currently starring in a production of Into the Woods as the baker's wife. Please welcome now, Abby Underweiser.
When I was in elementary school, I would sometimes dress up in what my dad would wear to work. I wanted to be just like him. In his tailored clothing going off to court, he looked so smart to me. I would wear my brother's blazers, button-downs, and sometimes even a tie to school. The principal of my elementary school would ooh and ah as I got out of my car in the drop-off. I always felt my best when I was expressing myself. And being a second grader, wearing neon pink would not do that. Last year when I was 13, I ran for president in my middle school. No one in my family was surprised when I announced that I wanted to wear a suit to give my speech. My decision to not wear a dress, however, ended up having a much bigger impact than I could have imagined. It was the day before my speech, and after being picked up by school from my mom, we rushed to Lauren Taylor, and we were on the hunt for what I described as a power suit. Yes, they had a lot of different dresses and skirts, but no suits for a girl my size. This was really surprising to me since I've always been exposed to non-gender specific clothing in my household. My mom wears men-inspired clothing like wingtip shoes. My brother has no problem with wearing pink, and my sister has these awesome pinstriped pants. After spending over an hour at Lauren Taylor trying to find a combination of things that could work, we gave up and went to Bloomingdale's. The stores were already getting ready to close, so the pressure was definitely on. After realizing that they also had nothing, my mom suggested that we look at the boys' suit section. At first, I was hesitant. I wouldn't usually go into the boys' section, but I was going to do anything to get that suit, and I couldn't care less about what the other people in the store thought about me. After looking through suits that were probably meant for bar mitzvah boys, I finally found one I loved, a navy blue pantsuit which fit me perfectly. Yay! Even though I wanted to wear a suit, though, I still wanted to look feminine, and just wearing a t-shirt underneath my jacket wouldn't do that. I ended up getting a woman's silk camisole top at Banana Republic, which was an extra small. I didn't even know they made sizes that small, but it worked out because it was sitting there alone on the sale rack as if it was expecting me. After 6 hours of trying to find what to wear, we finally did it and we got everything. The next day was speech day and I headed to school in my blue suit. I walked down the hallways and some of my teachers saw me and were so supportive and enthused that I wasn't wearing a dress. They said things like, "Go Abby!" I guess people don't usually see girls my age wearing suits, so this was definitely a confidence booster. As I was heading towards the auditorium, speech and cup of throat coat tea in my hand, I passed a 6th grader who had just arrived at school. His eyes were glued to me and followed me down the hall. He looked at me as if I were this mature adult, even though I was barely 3 inches taller than him. Already, I was becoming aware that my clothing was having an impact on the kids around me, which was not my initial intention, but it still was interesting. That day, I did my speech 3 times to around 1,200 students. Each time, so many teachers and fellow classmates came up to me and told me that they voted for me and that they loved my outfit. Right then, I realized how wearing my pantsuit not only affected me, but also impacted the way other girls around me saw fashion. Knowing that made me realize that whether or not I won the election, I was still able to cause some change in the school, even if it was just for one day. While in the end, I didn't end up winning as president, the entire experience still made me realize that there is a need for powerful clothing for young girls. I believe that dresses and skirts should not be our only options. This has all inspired me to try to be a part of changing that, whether it'll be through design or in partnering with people in the clothing industry. On a side note, over the last few weeks, I ran for vice president of my 9th grade class. This time, the whole process was a lot less formal because of social distancing. So I didn't wear my suit, but instead an Argyle sweater with some jeans. The thing is, we should all be able to wear what we feel comfortable in, and clothing that reflects our individuality and sense of power. I could have just picked up a dress and gone home that day, but I really do believe that clothing helps us express ourselves. And even though I hope my speech last year was strong and showed how I respect everyone and their choices, I do believe that my choice to wear what I did somehow modeled how I'm willing to fight for what may not come easily. Just 2 days ago, I got my good news about my current election. I won! I'm very excited to be vice president this year in my 9th grade. I want to help everyone connect and get closer with one another while honoring everyone's strengths and, of course, their style. And who knows, you may just see me trying to change my school's gender norms this year, one suit at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Rabbi Blake remarked to me as we were listening to Abby's story that he remembers when Abby was born. How wonderful it is to get to see young people grow up through this congregation. And Abby, thank you for sharing your story with us here tonight on Simchat Torah. Our 4th and final story of resilience for this year's Story Slam comes from Glenn Fogel. Glenn lives in Scarsdale with his wife, Amy, his daughter, Alexandra, who's in college, and his son, Robert, who's finishing up his senior year of high school. Amy and her family have been members of WRT for more than half a century, and Amy's mom, Jane Roberts, has taught at WRT for decades. When Glenn met Amy, there was never a thought in their minds of not being a part of the WRT community. Please welcome now Glenn Fogel.
Hi. So the theme is resiliency, and I think one way you get resiliency is having been through a bad time in the past, and having gone through it helps you prepare for bad times in the future. And there was a time in my past where it was a tough time. It was the mid-90s. I lost my job, and that was pretty devastating. And in pretty short order, I also, unfortunately, lost my grandmother, who I loved very dearly, and had to put down the family dog, and that was very sad. And then my father was exercising one morning, walked upstairs, said something that my mother didn't really hear, and then thud, and he was gone, 64. It was a tough time, and I was having trouble getting another job, and I thought, well, I always wanted to write a novel, so I started to write a novel, and I wrote it. But it's not that easy to sell a novel, having written one. And I'm trying to sell it and working on it and alone and trying to figure what I'm going to do. And I had a friend, Ted, and Ted had a fiance, Beth. And Ted and Beth called me one day and they say, hey, Glenn, why don't you go out and date someone we know? And I'm like, I don't know, what's she like? And they describe her, she's a lawyer. And I'm thinking, I don't know. And then they say, she used to be an editor at Random House. And I'm like, oh, well, I'd like to meet her very much. So set up a date, brunch date, because I'm not working. And we go, and not a lot of sparks that date. But I'm able to get a second date. And I go to the second date, and she knows I'm working on this novel, and it's not exciting her. And that date wasn't great. But somehow I'm able to convince her for a third date, and I show up and I'm carrying the cardboard box with the manuscript because I know this is my last chance. And she sees it and it's like I'm carrying dog poop, and she just wanted to be away from it. And I say, look, could you maybe just take a look at this and, see maybe something? So she took it. And I leave that date and I'm thinking to myself, well, I just killed a whole bunch of trees for absolutely no reason. But about an hour later, I got a call from her. And she says, hey, this isn't so bad. And I'm thinking, yes! Well, turns out, book never gets sold. But as of last week, Amy and I have now been married 22 years. We got 2 great kids. Because of her, I am now the CEO of the world's largest travel company. You may have heard of some of them: Priceline, Kayak, Open Table, Agoda, Booking, a whole bunch. And it's really turned out quite well. So sometimes it all works out.
Thank you, Glenn. And thank you to all 4 of our storytellers. If you happen to be friends with, or even to casually know any of the 4 people, any of the 4 congregants who shared their stories this evening, I strongly, strongly encourage you to reach out to them, give them a big thumbs up. It's not easy to be so vulnerable, to share a true story from your life with a faceless sea of people. It's hard enough when you can see them out there in front of you in the dark, and it's even harder when you're recording it into a video camera, not sure who's on the other end and not able to get any live feedback in the room and thunderous round of applause knowing that you did a great job. So please reach out to our storytellers. Please tell them how proud we were. I certainly was proud of them, and thank them for their work. I thank also, again, Erica Radin for helping to direct these stories to make them great, and also Bonnie Bluestein and Rochelle Waldman for helping us to find our 4 terrific storytellers. We wish you all a Chag Simchat Torah Sameach, a happy Simchat Torah. We turn now towards the conclusion of our service.
And it's so nice for the first week in many weeks, I have an actual Aron HaKodesh to which I can turn and open the doors as I invite us to rise for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon HaKol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. There's something beautiful, powerful, and poignant about this ritual so cherished by the Jewish people, that we cling to Torah, so much so that we couldn't stand to allow more than a couple of seconds elapse between completing the book and starting over again to hear the story anew. And so it is with the memories of the people we have loved and who have died. As soon as they leave this world, we tell their stories. We go back to the beginning. We keep them alive through their words and the indelible impression of their ways. The Torah of their lives is told again and again and again, and therefore confers upon them a very special and sweet kind of immortality. And so as we prepare to remember our loved ones and honor their lives through the words of the Mourner's Kaddish, we invite all those in a period of mourning in our community to rise in the following order. Will those who are within 7 days of remembrance please feel invited to rise? And if you are within 30 days of remembering a loved one who has died, would you please rise? If you are within a first year of remembrance, please rise. And those who are within or who are observing a yahrzeit tonight, would you please rise? And each of us in our own way, in our own place, will stand with you in heart, in spirit, and in body as we remember our loved ones. This week from our Westchester Reform Temple community, we are remembering those who've been taken in the last 4 weeks. Norman Goodfarb, husband of Rowena Goodfarb, father of Judy Chamlin and Adam Goodfarb. Jean Ferrenbaker, mother of Larry Ferrenbaker. Gail Zick, mother of Matthew Zick. Marcia Aberly, sister of Arthur Resnick. Isaac Levanta, father of Sandra Oliver. Albert Sipsener, husband of Jill Spielberg, father of Reed and Griffin Sipsener, son of Rachel and Rob Sipsener, and brother of Mara Sipsener. And Eugene Goldenberg, the husband of Hannah Goldenberg and father of Tony Bernstein and Bryn Peltz. And those the anniversary of whose death we commemorate this Shabbat, this Simchat Torah. Ruth Adler, Paul Auspitz, Lester Bardak, Francis Barr, Stephen Bossis, Laura Braverman, Natalie M. Korchmar, Victor Citron, Laura Klebansky, Edward Davidowitz, Cecil Dodick, Cecil Dodick, Abraham Dolans, Ronald D. Ecker, Rose Goldman Waxenberg, T. Donald Eisenstein, Calvin Ezrin, Etta Fishman, Stanley Fisher, Jacqueline Friend, Anita Frisch, Morris Weston, Abraham Friedman, Marilyn Goldberger, Emmanuel Green, Edith Gross, Herbert Guggenheimer, Paul Herman, Lydia Jacobs, Ellen Kent, Dennis Kerner, Beryl Cohn, Howard Kravitz, Benjamin Lass, Wanda Lockwood, Rita Margolis, Frederick Marsh, David Mayhew, Louis Medvinsky, Pearl Mizrahi, Jane Ortner, Arthur Parisi, Sidney Pepperbloom, David Robert Pearls, Martha Prince, Sylvia Ray, June Pearl Robinowitz, Benjamin Rocklin, Bill Rosenberg, Rabbi Jerome Rosenblum, Carol Rosenthal, Clara Roth, Shirley Rubin, Herbert Schnitzer, Richard Schwartz, Morris Schwitzman, Harris Shapiro, Hilda Simons, Anna L. Sloan, Jean Stiefel, Gus Strauss, Shirley Tainsky, Maurice Toff, David Weiss, Richard Wiesenthal, Sally Wiley, Helen Wilner, and William Wolk. If you would like to add names to our commemoration, or if I inadvertently have mispronounced a loved one's name, kindly speak your names at this time. We invite you to rise as we offer the mourner's Kaddish together. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'izman kari v'imru amen, Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam alamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu, le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama Rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Going to offer just a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to ask for Rabbi Reeser to elaborate on at least one of them. Today is Chag Simchat Torah, which is also Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of the 8-day festival of Sukkot, on which Yizkor, or memorial prayers, are offered. So tomorrow morning, there are a couple ways in which you can observe the holiday with WRT. At 9 o'clock a.m., I'll be leading a Torah study session from 9 until 9:45 over Zoom. The link you can obtain online through the website or the weekly electronic newsletter. And I'll be inviting us to consider the way in which the rabbinic tradition and the Jewish mystical or Kabbalistic tradition understands the Torah as a blueprint for creation. So if that idea sparks your intrigue, please join us online from 9 to 9:45 for a special Simchat Torah study session in the morning. Then in person at 10 o'clock and over Zoom, we'll be both leading and streaming a service live from one of the two beautiful Sukkot that are still standing for the festival on the WRT campus. I'll be joined by Cantor Mia Fram Davidson and our wonderful rabbinic intern, Ariel Milan Polisar. And there may yet be an opportunity to sign up for an in-person space at that service. If you would like to memorialize your loved ones' Yizkor prayers and a Yizkor drash or Yizkor mini sermon will be offered. We look forward to praying with you and celebrating the festival and remembering our loved ones together tomorrow at 10. Again, both in person if you sign up so that we can maintain social distancing. Mask wearing will be required. And then the congregation extends a heartfelt Mazal Tov to the families of Jessica Katz, who will celebrate her bat mitzvah in the morning, Sophie Newman, who will celebrate her bat mitzvah in the mid-afternoon, and Aaron Gantz, who will celebrate his bar mitzvah in the late afternoon. So a wonderful way to acknowledge new beginnings on this festival of both ending and beginning Torah. We celebrate Jessica and Sophie and Aaron and all of their loved ones, and we wish you a Mazal Tov. As we move through the week, there's a lot going on. The one event that I'd like to just highlight is our upcoming gathering over WRT's new racial justice initiative. Rabbi Reeser, could you just add one comment on what people should be looking for and flagging on their calendar, please?
Yes, the kickoff meeting for our racial justice working group was this past Tuesday, but our first program is on Thursday, October 22nd. We'll be hearing from a renowned scholar, Eric Ward. He writes about the intersection of anti-Semitism and white nationalism. I've heard him speak before. He has an article that's widely hailed as having sort of foreseen the uptick we've seen in recent years of anti-Semitism in this country. It's an event that's co-sponsored by WRT and 13 other Westchester area congregations, also in partnership with Machon Hadar, one of the leading institutes of Jewish learning in Manhattan. It's actually just the first in a 3-part series, but come and join us first on Thursday, October 22nd, to hear from Eric Ward, to join with other WRT congregants and Jews from around our region, and to learn more about what our racial justice working group will be up to over the coming months.
And finally, I'll bring your attention to what will happen a week from tonight on Shabbat Breshit, the first Sabbath of the regular cycle of Torah readings for the year. WRT will, as we have for many years now in the month of October, also acknowledge a pink and teal Shabbat for the month that is the time of year when we acknowledge the toll that breast cancer and ovarian cancer have taken on Jewish communities in particular and on all communities all over the world. And we partner with a wonderful organization, Sharsheret, a Jewish community organization that provides support and counsel for women and their families who are experiencing breast and ovarian cancer. So Pink and Teal Shabbat is next Friday, and we'll hear remarks from our congregant, Dr. Susan Klugman. And we'll also have a really beautiful announcement from our congregant who happens to be a high schooler, Daniel Rublin, who is going to be undertaking a very special fellowship with the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, and will speak to us about this critical moment in American life and how we can exercise our Jewish consciences and voices in the halls of Congress. So finally, I am aware from some feedback that we've gotten that there's been some audio-visual glitching tonight, and that every 20 seconds or so, the video and audio freezes momentarily and then might speed up a little bit. We are aware of the problem. We think it might have something to do with the broadband at Westchester Reform Temple. Remember, this is the first Friday night that we're all back in the building streaming together. So thank you for those of you who've pointed out the issue, and trust that we are aware and will do what we need to do to address it properly and as expediently as we can. So we're going to offer the concluding brachot, the blessings of our service, and on this Shabbat and festival, we invite us to join together in our Kiddush. Please rise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol am, v'romamanu mikol lashon, v'kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav. V'atiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava, Shabbat umoadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason, et yom chag ha'atzeret hazeh, v'et yom ha'shabbat hazeh. Zman matan Toratenu mikra kodesh, zecher litziat mitrayim, kivanu v'charta v'yotanu kidashta mikol hamim. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh amo Yisrael v'hazmanim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
So the one thing I don't have here at the temple is a challah. Will you please make of yourselves a braided challah? That doesn't mean you have to go into the kitchen, but maybe just, I'm going to put my arms around my colleagues on Zoom. Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
B'teavon, Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. We're going to welcome those of our attendees who've joined us on Zoom to come into the Zoom room with your service leaders. We wish one another Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us tonight.